Podcast 8, Correct Use of Energy on the Subsidiary Timeline. As the world will undergo its different processes, we have 5 elements, of which the 5th is the holographic-energetic blueprint, tied up to the different types of cube technologies that are breaking down due to the core cube is no longer working and feeding these reality programs. And yes, the Atlantean projects and factions and whatnot have come up with their versions to keep their lineages and their code streams within the main program running to their benefit, whatever that is. The rest of us that are not participating in these projects, we will see the changes of our world as the holographic energetic higher order dimensional levels ceases to exist as part of our reality field. And what will be left will be the 3 dimensions that we are aware of: the quantum level, the electromagnetic energies, as well as the particle molecular type of reality that we are living within. The latter being composed of 4 elements, as have been taught in all teaching systems that we associate with water, earth, fire, and wind. And as our reality field undergoes its different processes of transforming these elements into the cessation of them, where they are no longer upholding the different dynamics of a reality field, our world will change accordingly, turning into larger and larger areas where there will be no water, either due to wind or fire that will change the soil. And then once the water is gone, then the wind will then be the next large destructive forces. And then once that's gone, either if it's wind or fire, then these, because wind and fire go hand in hand, then once that's done, what's left will be the earth that is turning larger and larger areas into dust. And then as we see with Africa, and once that happens, then it's no longer possible to sustain life. That will, of course, lead to migrations and all sorts of resource allocation, new technologies, etc., and we'll just leave that unfold as it unfolds, where we will focus on what's going on as part of the continuation scheme on the main levels of, here the main levels of the subsidiary timeline, on the path of ascension, the path of enlightenment, the path of awakening, the path of activation, or the subsidiary timeline, as I call it, to avoid all of these different belief systems that are out there. There will be this kind of soul migration, so to speak, to be able to connect to the subsidiary timeline. There will be a slim potentiality for that in the southern hemisphere, because the way that the core cube has now been reconfigured, the rebirth of souls will first and foremost happens in the southern hemisphere, which will then lead to depletion of population in the northern hemisphere, which will be suitable for the fewer and fewer resources that actually, it's a kind of a balance that will happen in the northern hemisphere, even though there will be a cry from many of the insectoid avian-based females that are crying for more babies. But as we've seen with these insectoid souls that are in human form, their amount of offspring, including of which some have been the foundation of souls that are tied to the underworld, has not led to anything conducive. And that's what the technology will now remove from the northern hemisphere, push into the southern hemisphere. That will then give shorter and shorter lifespans until it's no longer possible to live in the southern hemisphere due to extreme heat and lack of living conditions. So that's the future, 100 years into the future, where it will look like that, 2135. Once that happens, then of course there are the other stages, which is no longer of our concern because we won't be there. But we will observe these dynamics as they happen, a little bit here, a little bit there, as the pattern begins to collapse, as a large pattern around our world, which will collapse on different nodal points, and these areas will then be impossible to inhabit, and with that, people will migrate into other areas, which will then be overpopulated, and then that will collapse, and then they'll migrate again, and then that will collapse. And the only way to go around is, as I said, there will be no further incarnation, there will be no more souls coming in, and there will be recirculation of whatever's left, and that will be pushed to the southern hemisphere with shorter lifespan, and eventually there won't be any souls reincarnating whatsoever. And there will be only a small group of humans on the main timeline that will be able to reproduce. These will typically be the clones, and they will later on be administered by the Atlantean elite. That will be the new controlling factions on our planet. So anyway, so this is how that one's going to go. We have had plenty of science fiction movies telling us where humanity is going. So that's in a kind of a version of that, whatever that will be. Our correct use of energy is, of course, to not deplete our timeline. So we must be very resource mindful in how we are using the energies of the subsidiary timeline. And one of the main lessons is the ability to give back. By keeping our highest purity rate, high standards, and highest progression rate, we are emitting energy. We are vibrating back into the subsidiary timeline, where it will reveal to us the coherent type of energy patterns that is alignment with our vibrational pattern. Our vibrational pattern will come in movement due to the original consciousness abilities that we are now trying to exemplify to a minimum degree. We can't go to full scale because this is not a fourth dimensional reality, but we can go to the original understanding of the dynamics of the outer domain. In the outer domain, we use processes and projects to change our consciousness configuration. That's why we quote unquote work here. Everything we do must be within the goal of changing our holographic-energetic configuration. It's not about earning money. We are allowed to take payment for the time invested in the project or the product that we are producing. That's important, but that's all we are charging for. The time we put into the project or the product. So the prices will be according. What we will do, these projects or products will be a co-creation of the transformational processes, the transformation processes that we are undergoing on the subsidiary timeline. Whatever these transformational processes are, that's up to our creativity. A transformational process would be to take a piece of clay and turn it into a beautiful figurine. Of course, our energy will then be imbued in that figurine, and that we should, of course, be aware of, that once we create something with our hands, our energy will go into it. We, of course, do it to learn to work with the densest form of energy that is exemplified in matter. So if I choose to, for instance, become buy a pottery wheel and begin to make bowls and whatnot, I would do so because then they would become part of my everyday living and potentially could become part of everyday living for others, even though I know the moment I begin to trade off these or sell them, then it should technically only be within the inner ring or the community of the other ones that are on the subsidiary timeline. So some of the things that we choose to produce to learn the lessons of the extreme crystallized dense matter and what we can and cannot do with them will be for personal purposes. But that works too. That's pillar 1-7, where we learn to work with different forms of energy so that different levels of our consciousness and our awareness potentials can develop into more complex information patterns where we learn from these experiences and at the same time are also co-creating, exemplifying what we are learning into something useful. Then there are the sciences that I will imbue on. That's tied to my mind field, and that's tied to the fifth dimensional energies. Producing the different forms of sciences and then being more focused on actually doing as a kind of booklet and paper, and not through vibration as I've done here in the course material. If I want it into the fourth dimension, then I will speak it out as I'm doing here. That's a manifestation into the fourth dimension where I'm using sound as a vibration. But that's only because I got the radiation level behind. So there's a purpose of my sounding of these ideas and this information. It vibrates into my holographic energetic architecture and create a pattern there that then will later on be imbued with the sciences of the higher levels of my holographic energetic architecture, supported by the energies of the subsidiary timeline, because these sciences tie back into the Pillar Project and some of the original reality field programs. So that means my co-creation level is not only on a personal 1-7 pillar or regards to others on a 2-8 pillar, whatever that is, regards to other, whatever that service to others will be, whether it's as a healer or a producer of products or whatever it is, which kind of gets us into trouble as things are right now, because most of the ones that we would do that service to would be outside the subsidiary timeline, and by the law of participation, we would then become part of the main timeline where things are not going so well. So as I see it, the touch with the base program should be as minimalistic as possible. Then there are the 3-9 pillar where we work with reality itself, but with the configurations, the work we should do there should be of such a level that it is an equivalent with and part of the original advanced civilization, technology, and understanding how to work and collaborate and transform reality units. That's the 3-9 pillar. And then the 4-10 pillar, which I mostly have talked about, governance, but actually it's the law of reciprocity, that reality itself will mirror back to us what we can refine, what we can do better. And in that governance, it doesn't mean that we team up in councils, but it means how do we govern the reality energies as we have worked with 1, 2, 3. And here reality mirrors back to us what we should and should not do. And here the mirroring back will be part of the subsidiary timeline that will mirror back to us. So you can do so and so and so, principle 1, 2, and 3 with your product or your process or your product, project, or process. These are 3 P's, right? We still have the 3 P's, but we have either as a product, something that can be exchanged, or a process where we're developing our consciousness potentials and a holographic energetic architecture, or a project where we're developing our consciousness units into something that leads to some form of higher order science, where we understand the work with vibration and radiation. So these are the ways that we are working inside the subsidiary timeline. It goes into these 5 dimensions, where we learn to work correctly with these 5 dimensions that then can be divided and subdivided into smaller units within the main 5 dimensions. As in, step 1, the processes of our own holographic energetic architecture and structure to maintain that, uphold that, and develop that. The 2-8 pillar, the second level, the second dimension, where whatever we're doing should be in service to others, whether the others are a kind of a group that actually has manifested, or it's a kind of a future civilization that will be the others we're working towards. The 3-9 pillar, that is the law of participation, whatever we focus on, we give energy, and we should give something back to reality as we are part of, to upgrade and develop and progress the subsidiary timeline. Pillar 410, that goes with governance or the law of reciprocity, where we learn to govern our processes, our projects, and our products in a manner so that they are feed looping back both into the subsidiary timeline with more complex information patterns, but are also producing complex awareness patterns in our holographic energetic architecture, developing our consciousness potentials, and at the same time also have an at-large benefit or for the highest good of the many potentiality, whatever that means, because we are getting into some new reality dynamics, which we are not accustomed to, what that actually means for the highest good of the many. And then the 5th dimension, where we are learning the true knowledge, the true sciences of what it actually means to be an advanced citizen. So these are the 5 dimensions of the subsidiary timeline we are now embarking on. And we are using the pillar 1, 7, 2, 8, 3, 9, 4, 10, 5, 11, the different levels of that from the original pillar project, or at least I am. Others might choose to go about it differently. Whatever that is, they will get their version of the teachings that they need once they're on the subsidiary timeline. And again, be aware of influences, inflation, and all sorts of interception. These are the eyes, like an eye, not an eye that you're looking at, but the letter I, where you see the I am technologies that are based upon self-deception and greed and whatnot, where interference from other groups that are easily have access to you because you have this super ego that wants to do all sorts of things, or the interception that is creating different kind of programs because there are weaknesses in your holographic architecture that links you to older timelines where it's possible to create false programs that links you up to their timeline. And the inflation where you think you're further down the path than you actually are, that you think this and whatever, and you haven't really understood the true commitment and being humble, and everything that you are doing is to some sort of self-reflection of how good you are. So in that manner, of course, I'm doing the opposite kind of, whatever I do, I'm always looking at how things are not working well. And I know that's just the opposition of the other one, but that's to keep my ego structure and all the little critters that wants to feed that in check, because we have an ego. We'll continue to have an ego inside this reality. As long as we're in this form, it keeps continuously, due to the way that the mind field and the emotional field are built up, creating an ego. That's what runs this physicality. So it will keep recreating itself. And that's what we keep in check by being humble and always focus on the coherence patterns and the harmony and balance of whatever we're doing, and the possibility of giving back, either as a higher order level of energy dynamic within ourselves, as a cleaning and maintenance and self-scanning and self-healing, or as a service to others in whatever form that will take, or as a service to reality in whatever form that will take, as a kind of reciprocity rate that feedback loops into us and reality and others in the timeline, so that everything grows into a higher and larger potentiality of progressive dynamics, which leads to a higher degree of inner knowledge and sciences and things that we can imbue into the 1, 2, 3, 4 cycle of things as part of the progressive cross. And that's why we talked about the crosses. So now you begin to understand what it means to be on the subsidiary timeline and the correct use of energy. Everything that leads to distortions will set us back. And if we don't learn the lessons on the subsidiary timeline, even though we have the correct configuration, if we don't know how to work with the subsidiary timeline, we will remain on step 1. And of course, if we really falter and fall and get dragged into something where we shouldn't be, there is a kind of a quarantine zone that we'll be pushed into, and then we'll stay there where we will learn how to undo everything before we get back on the subsidiary timeline and the main path. So that's important to understand this. There are things that simply must be let go of if we want to remain. And we shouldn't want to remain because we're driven by fear or greed or whatever it is that pushes us there, or hope or a desire or whatever it is. We are there because we naturally, due to the laws of energetic and genetic affinity, belong there. We belong there because our energy configuration is in alignment with it. And we have worked our way to be in alignment with it. And if we then feel the proudness and we feel pride and all sorts of things, we can definitely say, well done. But at the same time, we're also just super humble and saying, I know how easily I can be kicked out. So I'm humble in my approach to this. I am appreciative of having the possibility for a continuation, but I'm also fully aware that everything rests upon my own choices, and that I at any point, at any time, in any circumstances can mess it up and be thrown into the quarantine zone, where I then will have to face my demons, quote unquote, and whatever is going on in my fields that are not accommodating for the continuation on the continuation path. And I accept these circumstances because it is what it is. This is how advanced civilizations work. If you're not in alignment with the overall purpose and function of the reality field, you get segregated and you go somewhere else. But you do have a choice to do the correct thing. Do you want to stay here? Well, then learn how to behave and work with energy as you're supposed to. And if you don't, well, go somewhere else where you can work with who and whatever you want to express and exemplify, and that's perfectly okay. Whatever the outcome is. It's like, as we say it in Danish, if you don't like the smell of the bakery, then go somewhere else, right? This is an opportunity. And there are rules, and there are laws, and there are principles, and there are ways to behave. And these are part of what creates higher order balance and harmony. And that was what the humanoids are opposing, because they feel a loss of self. They fear a loss of independence. They fear the loss of being an autonomous being that can do whatever they want to be without the karmic effects. They want to be whatever they can be without the karmic effects, as in the law of reciprocity governance. That's why they stay between 1, 2, and 3. They rarely go into the 4th level where the reciprocity kicks back and show you, okay, this is what you earned. They prefer just to be in their own scheme in Pillar 1-7, and then others are used for their personal purposes, and reality is used for their personal purposes. And that's why they stay on the stagnant cross where they create different things and whatever. But that's so we kind of understand the difference there. We're doing this with an eagerness and appreciativeness of the reciprocity rate, showing us who and what we're made of and what we need to learn and how we need to work with this. And that keeps us humble. And we are appreciative of that ability to remain humble. That means to use the correct energy and consciousness in the correct amount in the correct situation, according to the rules and the principles and laws. And all we want to do with whatever we are doing is to create more balance, more harmony, more order, and more progression, more ability for as many as possible to progress to the highest possible outcome of whatever they can become. This doesn't necessarily mean that we actually work with living beings, because they have got all of their different issues inside this reality. But we can work with it as a blueprint of what an advanced civilization might be, how that potentially could unfold. The sciences to create these kind of advanced civilizations, the sciences of the psychology, the sciences of the ways of living, the sciences of the technology, etc., etc. So these are potential living beings that we exemplify into potential sciences and schematics, as are done with the whole academy. These are potentials, possibilities, probabilities that can be worked with. And as they are as collective thought forms and technology and abilities and possible outcomes that people can choose, then that benefits reality. Reality is a mix between what is co-created and exemplified and what is a possibility to be exemplified. And that's part of how we operate on the subsidiary timeline. That's the correct use of energy. It's not that we are fantasizing, sitting in our daydreams and thinking about a possible gorgeous future that will more be based upon our emotions and projections from emotions. When you work with real reality configuration and construction, you are working with complex holographic-energetic architecture that leads to specific patterns that has specific purpose and function of transformation of energy into different varieties of these transformational processes. Whatever that means, whether it's within the biology with no awareness or no higher order awareness, so to speak, no consciousness, or it's biology organics with consciousness, or it is non-biological with machine learning properties, or non-biological where you could say there is no learning possibilities whatsoever, just raw matter. All of these 4 different levels on the cross are something we're working with holographic energetically to transform, because as we transform these 4 different states of existences, we are also transforming our own holographic energetic architecture. We are working with denser forms of energy to transform a holographic energetic architecture. It's a feedback loop of what we create and co-create with reality. Creates a progression dynamic within reality, and it feedback loops to our more advanced levels of holographic energetic architecture that will allow us to eventually to enter into the core domain and become 6-dimensional, from where we become a sphere And that complexity in our sphere will align us with different forms of possibilities and probabilities in the middle domain that will allow us to unfold certain levels of organic vessels within specific sectors. That is alignment with our complex patterns, complex information systems, and complex consciousness patterns that have been reconfigured into all sorts of very complex code configurations that allows for expression of certain abilities and functionality and purpose within reality, where we get in place according to the complexity level and what we can contribute with the exchange rate of our ability to transform energy. The better we are transforming energy, the better emplacement we will get, or the more we can work with a broader scale of different types of co-creational projects. That's the correct use of energy. And I think that's kind of what I want to say on this one. I'll give it a little pause here and then I'll contemplate if there's something else I need to add here. I just asked the holographic teaching system if there is anything more I need to add at this point. What sticks out is the laws of energy, the understanding of the proper utilization of energy on the subsidiary timeline. Now, we work with that in the transition and especially in the template sciences, and you can go through the different laws that are very similar to the principles. Remember, the principles are working with the consciousness, awareness within energy. The rules of engagement is when you work with the otherness, whether it's reality or other living beings, or it's just the collective holographic energetic architecture of advanced civilizations that while you're creating these different types of technologies or information patterns or collective thought forms or different types of patterns that allows for a potential outfolding if anyone chooses to do so, aka the architecture behind reality, for where life form can unfold different properties and possibilities, then it goes into 2 seconds. Sorry, I got a little lost there. It all goes into the laws of energy utilization. And what is happening right here, as I asked the holographic teaching system, okay, what is needed? It loads it up into my heart field. This is a new feature on the subsidiary timeline. It doesn't go into the brain. It goes into the heart field as a vibrational pattern that goes in and say, for me, since I have exhibited the rules and the principles in the work I've been doing the last my entire life, but most noticeably since 1999, where I walked through the Pillar Project on my own, in my own due pace. What is important for me now is the laws of energy, the true and direct understanding of the laws of energy utilization by the use of consciousness. So that's it's called a featural pattern that I must work with as part of the subsidiary timeline to find a specific level of emplacement that is suitable for my configuration. You see, technology on the subsidiary timeline, the holographic teaching system, is literally emplacing us into different categories and different sectors and different ways we can work. And with that, adapting that locality to our holographic energetic architecture and configuration and what is seen as the most profitable level of work to do. As in, this is the best way you can work with the natural laws of energy. Then because it's part of my heart field, then a vibration will begin to emit as part of the subsidiary timeline that will then anchor into different levels of potentiality of the subsidiary timeline. And then I'll begin to integrate some of these things. There'll be a feedback loop like between my heart field and the different configurations of the subsidiary timeline, which will ignite different nodal points that will release specific levels of information that will then feedback loop into my heart field that will create specific vibrational pattern and code configuration in my energy system that will then be picked up by my brain and put into different forms of contemplative states that will later on, perhaps or perhaps not, amount into some kind of exemplification. Some of it will just be as part of an inner configuration understanding and energy work. Other levels will be put into a project that might revolve around some kind of science. And some level of it will have to meet the criteria of co-creation inside this reality, whatever that means and whatever way I choose to do so. The latter part of the natural laws of energy are not so important, but it must still be exemplified to some degree inside this reality, where it's exemplified either as vibration or as a kind of manifestation that shows itself as a product that can then be destroyed and evaporated and cease to exist. Remember, the consequences of the outer domain is that everything that's here that turns into matter must undergo the processes of destruction. That's the outer domain. That's what's going on here. And that's challenging us to let go of what we're producing, and in that manner also understanding that whatever we're producing is not forever. It is changeable. It's under the laws of the outer domain, where everything is always changing. It's a constant change that either leads to elevation or destruction. And that's just how it is. So the ones we have crystallized it into some physical outcome or co-creation, then it only has one way to go, and that is into disorder and entropy. So that's the laws of the outer domain. Whereas if we work with consciousness potentials, then we can imbue it with the ability to transform and continue its progression journey as a part of an elevation, and that's also part of the natural laws of energy. So there are, when I talk about the natural laws of energy, I'm accepting the understanding that there are levels of the natural laws of energetic utilization that I have forgotten. So I must remember these, and they will present itself in different scenarios that will radiate from the information systems of my holographic-energetic architecture, my original consciousness potentials, what I remember from that. But I need the surroundings and my energy system on a vibrational level from my heart field to unfold that and exemplify it in different scenarios and challenges and possibilities that I will then learn from and activate the similar levels of my higher order architecture, from where I can then begin to implement the natural laws of energy in some of the sciences that I want to express and co-create and put into words that are the way that we can show the configuration, the reality field, code sequence configuration. We are using letters to do so. Drawings, not so much, because they are more associated with the vibrational fields. Once it turns into a pattern, it's more arranged by the vibrational field and less by the co-creative, innovative thought processes or radiation processes that gives the coding of a potential pattern. For the pattern to come into manifestation, then it begins to vibrate. So we have the code sequences, then we create a pattern with the code sequences, then the pattern becomes, then it connects all the dots like the neural network, and once it connects all the dots and it becomes a full-blown pattern, which we often see as a symbol or a piece of technology, then it begins to vibrate if it has enough energy and consciousness that it can connect to and be amplified by, and then the vibration will then begin to create different types of dynamics and forces within the different sectors of the pattern that will then co-work with each other as a system, which will create what we call emergent properties, and then it will begin to go into co-creation, as in manifesting throughout the energies of reality. Some of the sciences that goes with the original natural laws of energy utilization that I am to produce will be aligned with the original civilizations, and the project there is not as much manifestation inside this reality, but it is more the ability for me to co-create it with whatever's left of this reality and from the energies of the subsidiary timeline. So whatever I'm creating there will become a possible outcome and a program as part of the subsidiary timeline that might or might not be accessible for others that will follow, because this will run for the next 50 years. So some of the programs there will be accessible for others that are getting onto the subsidiary timeline further, later on or into the future, or however you want to put it. As I move into the other sectors, I will leave behind some of these sciences for others to connect to, and by that get more elaborate understanding of what the holographic teaching system actually is teaching, because it is in a way more advanced than what many have as they get onto the subsidiary timeline in the first step. They are still in need of explanatory systems that will assist them in their download processes and the unfolding of what they get downloads of. So it's not me teaching it verbally, but it is the sciences, either as part of booklets, that's the manifestation, but then also the programs inside the subsidiary timeline where these more complex levels of information systems can then be downloaded by the ones on the subsidiary timeline as part of the holographic teaching system. So that's part of some of the fifth dimensional energy utilization that I will be equipped to do, tested to do, taught to do, pushed to do. You pick your words yourself. Alrighty, so again, this is just me, but this is an exemplification of how that can unfold itself and what that means, and how we're going to work with co-creation on the subsidiary timeline, which means again that this is not about earning money. This is not about creating something so we can pay our bills. However that will unfold will present itself as the subsidiary timeline begin to rearrange our whole energetic architecture and we align more and more with the subsidiary timelines. I am pretty sure that whatever we need will come our way, whatever will be necessary and whatever will be part of our everyday life so we can pay our bills and get food in our mouth and whatever will present itself somehow, somewhere, and trust the process that will lead to the outcomes that will support us so we can continue our ongoing journey on the subsidiary timeline, the path that leads us out of this now completed reality field as we move on as part of the continuation scheme. So with that, I will end this podcast, and until next time, take care.